My boss once told me ideas are cheap. Execution is everything. I believed him. I trusted him with the best idea I ever had. An idea that could change everything for both of us. At least, that's what I thought. But behind closed doors, he filed the patents in his name. He pitched it to investors without me. He smiled in my face while stealing the future I had built with my own hands. Everyone thought he had one. Everyone thought I was finished. They didn't know I had planted a seed he couldn't steal, a flaw he couldn't see, a trap that would grow, until it swallowed his empire whole. My name is Hannah, and this is the story of how my boss took my startup idea and I took his reputation with it. The office was nearly deserted when the idea finally came to me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering slightly, casting long, tired shadows across the open-plan floor. It was close to midnight, but I was still there, hunched over my laptop, surrounded by half-drunk cups of coffee and crumpled pages of notes. Everyone else had left hours ago. The cleaning crew had already come and gone. Even the security guard at the front desk had given me a look that said, "Are you seriously still here?" when I waved goodnight. I was exhausted. My eyes dry and burning from staring at screens too long, but my mind was still racing. There was a problem we kept hitting, a bottleneck that no amount of extra work could fix. I'd spent weeks brainstorming, researching, sketching diagrams that led nowhere. Until now. It started with a stray thought, something almost ridiculous. I dismissed it at first, shaking my head and reaching for my coffee. But it stuck. Not at me. Whispered, "What if?" I grabbed a fresh sheet of paper and started scribbling. One idea led to another, then another. By the time I realized what was happening, the sun was starting to rise, bleeding weak pink light through the dirty windows. I had something. No, I had it. It wasn't just a workaround. It was a breakthrough. A new way to approach the entire structure of our platform. A way to cut costs, scale faster, reach a broader market. A way to leapfrog our competitors entirely. Heart-pounding. I threw together a rough outline, then a detailed draft, then a preliminary pitch deck. I barely noticed the hours slipping away. For the first time in months, I wasn't just solving a problem. I was creating something new. I saved the file under a folder titled Project Phoenix, a name that felt fitting, and collapsed onto the couch in the break room, too wired to sleep, too exhilarated to sit still. This was going to change everything. I could feel it in my bones. And so, after a quick shower at the gym downstairs and a change of clothes from my emergency stash, I waited until 8 a.m. and marched straight into Mr. Graham's office. He was already there, nursing his first coffee of the day, his expensive watch gleaming on his wrist. He looked up, surprised to see me so early. "Hannah," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Burning the midnight oil?" "I think I figured it out," I said, barely able to keep the excitement out of my voice. I mean, really figured it out. I watched his face carefully as I explained, outlining the idea in broad strokes, showing him my rough diagrams, the mock-ups, the financial projections. At first, he listened impassively, his expression neutral. But then, slowly, his body language shifted. He leaned forward. His eyes sharpened. His fingers tapped a restless rhythm against the desk. By the time I finished, he was practically vibrating with energy. "This is big," he said, voice low. "Really big." I nodded, trying to tamp down the growing swell of pride in my chest. "I think so too." He stood up, pacing behind his desk, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. "We need to move carefully," he said. "Quietly. No leaks. We can't let anyone get wind of this before we're ready." I agreed immediately. It made sense. After all, ideas could be stolen, copied, diluted. We needed to protect it, nurture it, build it right. He smiled then, that warm, paternal smile I had learned to crave over the past 3 years working under him. "You're brilliant, Hannah," he said. "I knew you had it in you." That one sentence lit me up like a bonfire. Maybe, finally, everything I had sacrificed was about to pay off. The long nights, the missed birthdays, the friendships that withered from neglect. The relationships I let die because I was always too busy, too tired, too consumed with work. It was all worth it, I told myself. Because Mr. Graham wasn't just my boss. He was my mentor. He believed in me. Or so I thought. Over the next few weeks, I worked harder than I ever had in my life. I refined the pitch deck, built working prototypes, ran market analyses. I coordinated with the design team, consulted with engineers, even pulled favors from old college contacts to pressure test the model. Every step of the way, Mr. Graham was there. Praising, encouraging, guiding. He even joked once, clapping me on the back, "One day, you'll be running your own empire, Hannah. Just don't forget about us little people." I laughed, flushed with pride. In those moments, it was easy to believe he had my best interests at heart. He scheduled a meeting with the board, told me to prepare a final presentation, polished, airtight, bulletproof. "This is just a formality," he said. "You'll wow them. I know you will." I threw myself into the task, polishing every word, every graph, every projection. I stayed up 3 nights straight tweaking the slide transitions, rehearsing my talking points, anticipating every possible question. When I handed him the final version, he beamed. "This," he said, flipping through the deck, "is genius." I floated out of his office that day, drunk on hope. I was finally on the cusp of something extraordinary. I didn't notice that he never actually scheduled the board meeting. I didn't notice when he started avoiding me in the halls. I didn't notice when access to the shared project folder suddenly vanished. I was too busy dreaming, too busy believing. Until the announcement. I wasn't even invited to the press conference. I found out the same way everyone else did, through a LinkedIn post. There he was, Mr. Graham, grinning for the cameras, holding up a prototype that looked exactly like the one I had designed. The headline, CEO John Graham unveils revolutionary new platform, a vision years in the making. I sat frozen at my desk, the world blurring around me. Slide after slide scrolled across the company page. Diagrams, mock-ups, pitches, all mine, every last piece. Without my name, without my fingerprints. He had stolen it. He had stolen everything. Shock gave way to fury, a slow, burning rage that settled into my bones. I confronted him, of course. I stormed into his office the next day, shaking with anger, clutching printed copies of my original drafts. He didn't deny it. Not even a little. He smiled, that same warm, paternal smile, and said, "Ideas are cheap, Hannah. Execution is everything." I stood there, staring at him, realizing that the man I had trusted had never been my mentor. He had been a predator, and I had been the prey. I wanted to scream, to cry, to burn everything down. But I didn't, because somewhere, deep inside, a colder, sharper voice whispered, "He doesn't know. He doesn't know about the seed." When I built the prototype, I had woven a flaw into the foundation, a tiny, almost invisible vulnerability. A gap in the system's logic that would only surface under pressure, under real-world scale. It was a safety measure, a fingerprint, a way to prove authorship if my work was ever challenged. Mr. Graham, in his greed and arrogance, had stolen the blueprint without understanding its heart. He thought he had one. He had no idea that he had just built his empire on a ticking time bomb. And I wasn't going to lift a finger to stop it. All I had to do was wait. The launch was everything Mr. Graham had dreamed of. Press releases flooded the internet, full of breathless praise. Tech blogs called it a game changer, a disruptor, the future of the industry. Investors lined up, wallets open, dazzled by the buzz and the slick marketing videos. At the company, the mood shifted overnight. People who had barely glanced at me in the halls before now nodded, smiled, even tried to make small talk. It was funny in a sick way. They celebrated Mr. Graham's genius without realizing they were standing on a house of cards. And that house was already starting to sway. It started small, barely noticeable. A few customer complaints trickling in. Minor bugs. Unexpected errors. The support team brushed them off as growing pains. Then came the delays. Clients struggling to integrate the platform. Complaints about system crashes. Security vulnerabilities no one could explain. Inside the company, panic spread like wildfire. Mr. Graham, ever the showman, doubled down. "We're fine," he told investors. "Just a few kinks to iron out." He ordered the engineers to patch the issues, work overtime, fix the cracks. But the engineers were patching the wrong problems because they didn't understand where the rot really was. They didn't know that the flaw wasn't in the surface code or the user interface. It was in the foundation. The platform had a logic flaw embedded so deeply that no amount of surface-level repairs could fix it. It was like trying to repaint a building that was sinking into a swamp. And every update, every rushed patch, only made things worse. Customers began demanding refunds. High-profile clients walked away, citing irreparable instability. Competitors pounced, offering safer, more reliable alternatives. And Mr. Graham? He panicked. Behind closed doors, he screamed at the engineering teams. He blamed the junior developers. He accused everyone except himself. I watched from the sidelines, invisible, a ghost in the machine. And I smiled. Not because I wanted the company to fail. Not because I enjoyed seeing my coworkers suffer. But because for the first time in my life, I understood something powerful. When you build your success on someone else's work, when you steal dreams and call them your own, you're not building an empire. You're digging your own grave. One rainy Tuesday, about 3 months after the launch, everything came to a head. An investor, one of our biggest, scheduled an emergency call. I wasn't in the room, of course. I heard about it later from a friend in finance. The investor demanded answers. Why was the platform collapsing under real-world conditions? Why were critical systems failing? Why had millions been poured into something fundamentally broken? Mr. Graham tried to bluff, of course. He blamed unexpected market factors, transition turbulence, supply chain issues. But the investor wasn't buying it. He had hired his own independent audit team, and they had found the flaw. Not just found it, proven it. An unfixable vulnerability in the core architecture. A vulnerability that any competent engineer should have caught if they had truly built the platform themselves. The investor ended the call with brutal finality. "We're pulling out." Effective immediately. Panic tore through the company like a brush fire. Stocks plummeted. Partners withdrew. Employees started resigning en masse. Mr. Graham tried to spin it. Tried to rally the troops, but it was too late. The ship was sinking. And everyone knew exactly who was at the helm. The media, once so eager to crown him a visionary, turned savage. Headlines shifted overnight. From "the genius behind the next big thing" to "CEO faces scrutiny over failed launch" to "was it all a lie?" Leaked emails. Anonymous whistleblowers. Stories about toxic culture, shady dealings, and betrayal. His reputation, the thing he had valued even more than money, was burning down around him. And me? I stayed silent. I didn't leak anything. I didn't give interviews. I didn't post cryptic tweets or anonymous tips. I didn't have to. He had set his own trap. All I had done was lay the bait. Sometimes, the most devastating revenge is no revenge at all. Just the truth, allowed to breathe. And the truth was this. Mr. Graham had built his empire on stolen dreams. And in the end, it wasn't me who destroyed him. It was himself. The collapse of Mr. Graham's empire wasn't an explosion. It was a slow, grinding implosion. A series of humiliations stacking one after another until the walls finally caved in. Regulators started circling, sniffing out potential fraud. Former employees came forward with stories of manipulation and deceit. Class action lawsuits loomed on the horizon, a black cloud growing heavier each day. Mr. Graham, once the golden boy of the tech industry, became a cautionary tale overnight. And me? I quietly packed up my desk one evening after everyone else had left. No announcement. No farewell party. No drama. Just a simple email to HR, a box of my belongings, and a heart heavier than I cared to admit. Because even though I had seen it coming, even though part of me felt vindicated, another part of me still grieved. I had poured years of my life into that place, into that dream, into that version of myself who believed loyalty would be rewarded. That hard work alone could protect you. That girl was gone, but something stronger had taken her place. I took a few weeks off. No emails, no LinkedIn, no phone calls. I slept. I walked through the city without destination. I visited old friends I had neglected for too long. I rediscovered pieces of myself I hadn't realized I had lost. And slowly, quietly, a new idea began to take root. Not a product, not a platform, a vision. What if I built something for real this time? What if I built it right from the ground up, with my own hands, my own rules? My own name on the door? The thought terrified me, but it also electrified me. I started small, sketching ideas in coffee shops, calling in favors from old colleagues, the good ones, the ones who had left Mr. Graham's sinking ship long before I had. I rented a tiny office space in a building that smelled like old books and fresh paint. It had cracked windows and spotty Wi-Fi, but it was mine. I named my company Emberworks, because sometimes it's from the ashes that the strongest fires are born. We weren't flashy. No glossy press releases. No viral ad campaigns. Just hard work. Smart, ethical innovation. A commitment to creating something better, not just for profit, but for people. The first 6 months were brutal. Money was tight. Sleep was rarer. Doubt hovered constantly, a dark cloud just over my shoulder. But every small win, every client who believed in us, every product that launched without collapse, every tiny milestone felt like a revolution. And slowly we grew. 1 client became 3. 3 became 10. 10 became 20. By the end of our first year, Emberworks had landed contracts with companies Mr. Graham's old firm would have killed for. Investors began reaching out, this time on my terms. I built a team that cared about people as much as products. Engineers who weren't just brilliant, but kind. Marketers who told the truth instead of spinning lies. Leaders who lifted each other up instead of tearing each other down. We made mistakes, sure, but we owned them, learned from them, got better. And, through it all, I never forgot where I had come from. Every late night, every setback, every little victory, I carried the lessons of betrayal like armor. Not bitterness, not revenge, just knowledge. Knowledge of how easily trust can be weaponized. Knowledge of how crucial it is to build something, anything, on a foundation of integrity. And slowly, that knowledge became strength. I stopped flinching every time the phone rang. I stopped second-guessing every handshake, every compliment. Because I wasn't the naive girl from before. I was someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who knew that real success isn't stolen. It's earned. Brick by brick. Fire by fire. And as I stood in our tiny, crowded office on the night of our first major launch, surrounded by the team that had helped me build it, I realized something powerful. Mr. Graham hadn't destroyed me. He had freed me. He had forced me to burn the old life down. And from those ashes, I had built something he could never touch. Something he could never steal. Something truly, irrevocably mine. Success, when it finally came, didn't arrive like fireworks. It crept in quietly, like the slow rising of a tide. First, it was a mention in a niche industry blog, a glowing review of one of our products. Then a local tech magazine named Emberworks one of the top startups to watch. A week later, we were featured in a national business journal, alongside startups 10 times our size. And then came the phone calls. Clients who had once ignored my emails were now calling me, eager to meet. Investors who had laughed me out of rooms 2 years ago were now begging for a seat at the table. I took the meetings, listened politely, smiled at their compliments. But I didn't forget. I remembered every closed door, every dismissive glance, every moment I had doubted myself because of people like them. Emberworks wasn't just a company anymore. It was proof. Proof that you could do things differently. That you could win without cheating, lying, or stepping on the backs of the people who trusted you. We didn't grow by cutting corners. We grew because we built something real. And slowly, inevitably, people noticed. A year after our first major launch, Emberworks was being quietly courted for acquisition by 2 major tech firms. Our valuation had soared. We had gone from scrappy upstarts to serious players. And that's when he came back. I was sitting in my office one rainy Thursday afternoon, reviewing a new partnership proposal, when my assistant buzzed me. "There's someone here to see you," she said, her voice cautious. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." I frowned. "Who?" There was a pause. "John Graham." For a moment, the world tilted. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in months. Had almost convinced myself he had faded into obscurity. Gone quietly into the night like so many disgraced executives before him. Apparently not. I felt 1,000 emotions surge through me: anger, fear, triumph, pity. But mostly I felt nothing. Nothing but a quiet, calm certainty. "Send him in," I said. The door opened, and there he was. Older. Grayer. The sharp, polished edges dulled by failure. He walked into my office like a man walking into a church he no longer believed in. "Hannah," he said, forcing a smile. "You look successful." I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" He chuckled awkwardly, looking around the office, the awards on the walls, the bustling team visible through the glass partition. "I thought it was time we talked," he said. "Maybe clear the air." I said nothing. He plunged ahead. "I made mistakes," he said. "We both know that. But I'm a different man now. I've learned. I've grown." I raised an eyebrow. "Waiting." He swallowed. "I have some ideas," he said. "Big ideas. If we combined forces, I think we could do something incredible." There it was. The real reason he was here. Desperation thinly veiled as collaboration. I studied him for a long moment. Once, this man had held my future in his hands. Once, I would have given anything for his approval. Now, he was just another ghost from a life I had outgrown. I smiled, slow and genuine. "Thank you for the offer," I said. "But I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." He flushed, anger flickering behind his eyes. "You think you're too good for me now?" I shrugged. "I think I'm too smart to forget." He stared at me for a long moment, and for the first time I saw it. Not power. Not threat. Fear. Fear of becoming irrelevant. Fear of being forgotten. He turned without another word and left, the door clicking shut behind him. I sat there for a long time, listening to the rain drum against the windows. And for the first time in years, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even satisfied. I was simply free. Free from his shadow. Free from the need for his validation. Free to build a future that no one could steal. And somewhere, deep down, I hoped he found peace too. Not because he deserved it, but because I deserved to move forward without carrying his ghost any longer. In the months that followed, Emberworks didn't just grow. It exploded. Our product suite expanded. But we never lost the soul that made us different. Every decision was filtered through one question: does this make the world better or just richer? It wasn't just about profit anymore. It was about building something that would outlast all of us. Something real. Something clean. Something good. We launched initiatives to mentor young founders. We hosted workshops on ethical leadership. We sponsored scholarships for students who dreamed of creating, not exploiting. And the world noticed. Forbes ran a profile on us titled, "The Startup That Beat the System Without Selling Its Soul." Major conferences invited me to speak, not just about products, but about philosophy, about resilience, about building with integrity in a world that too often rewarded the opposite. At one event, after a keynote speech, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous, clutching a notebook to her chest. "Ms. Hannah," she said, voice trembling slightly, "how did you know? How did you trust yourself enough to walk away?" I smiled at her, truly smiled. "I didn't know," I said honestly. "I was terrified. But sometimes, surviving isn't about being fearless. It's about being scared and still walking forward." She nodded, eyes wide, and scribbled furiously in her notebook. I watched her walk away and realized this was my legacy. Not the millions in revenue, not the awards on the shelf, not even the company itself. It was the impact. The proof that it was possible to win without losing your soul along the way. Meanwhile, somewhere out there, Mr. Graham was fading. His name rarely came up anymore. When it did, it was usually in cautionary tales shared over conference drinks. Remember John Graham? The guy who tried to fake his way to the top. Yeah, tragic. Could have been great if he wasn't so, well, you know. There were rumors he had tried to start another company, that he had pitched investors under a fake name, that he was consulting for second-rate firms now, a ghost of his former self. I didn't know for sure. I didn't care. Because I had learned something important. You don't have to destroy your enemies. Time does it for you. All you have to do is keep building. One afternoon, as I was cleaning out old files from my laptop, I stumbled across a folder labeled Project Phoenix. The original sketches, the diagrams, the notes scrawled at 2 a.m. in desperation and hope. I opened one file and sat there, reading it slowly. It was messy, naive in places, but it was brilliant. It was mine. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, unexpected and hot. Not sadness. Gratitude. Gratitude for the girl who had stayed up all night chasing a dream. Gratitude for the woman who had refused to let betrayal define her. Gratitude for the fires I had walked through and survived. I closed the laptop gently. Some stories you don't rewrite. You outgrow them. And in doing so, you write better ones. Years later, people still asked me how it felt. To lose everything. To be betrayed so brutally. To see the life I had built torn away by someone I trusted. I never lied. It hurt, I said. Because it did. Some scars never fully disappear. They just stop bleeding. But if they pressed, if they really wanted to know the truth, I told them this. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because if Mr. Graham hadn't stolen my idea, I might have stayed small forever. I might have wasted years chasing approval from people who didn't deserve me. I might have settled for scraps when I was meant to build kingdoms. Sometimes, you need to be broken open to see what you're really made of. I built Emberworks not despite my pain, but because of it. Because I knew what it felt like to be silenced, to be erased, to be invisible. And I swore I would never let anyone feel that way under my watch. Our company motto wasn't just a slogan. It was a battle cry. Build with fire. Lead with honor. At our 5-year anniversary gala, I stood on a stage in front of hundreds of employees, partners, friends. Lights dazzled overhead. Champagne glasses clinked. Music swelled. But in my heart, it was quiet, calm, steady. I looked out over the crowd, faces shining with hope and pride, and felt a wave of emotion so powerful it nearly knocked me off my feet. Not because of the success, but because I recognized myself in them. The fighters, the dreamers, the ones who had been underestimated, overlooked, written off. And yet, here we all were, thriving, building, proving every doubter wrong simply by refusing to give up. When I took the microphone, I didn't talk about revenue or market share or awards. I talked about resilience, about how dreams aren't given, they're fought for, about how sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the best thing that could happen, because it forces you to decide, fold, or rise. And if you choose to rise, if you choose to build something beautiful out of the ashes they left you in, they can never touch you again. Not truly. Not where it matters. That night, long after the speeches ended and the lights dimmed, I sat alone in my office, the same tiny office where it had all started. The old Project Phoenix folder still sat tucked away in the cloud, untouched. I smiled and finally did something I had been meaning to do for years. I opened a blank document, and I wrote, to anyone who was ever told they were too small, too naive, too easy to steal from, your worth was never measured by their vision. It was always waiting inside you. Light it up. Burn so brightly they can't even look at you without remembering who they lost. And then I hit save. Not because I needed proof anymore, but because sometimes you write your survival story not to remember the pain, but to celebrate the fire that couldn't be put out. Because the truth is, he took my idea. He stole my moment. But he could never, ever steal my story. That was mine. And it always would be. Maybe you're sitting here now, holding your own broken dreams in your hands. Maybe someone you trusted turned out to be a thief. Maybe the world told you that you were foolish for believing, for hoping, for daring to dream big. I know how that feels. I know how it feels to watch something you built with your own hands get ripped away. To feel invisible. To feel powerless. To wonder if you'll ever recover. But hear me. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not small. You are not a mistake. You are a storm they couldn't cage. A fire they couldn't smother. A vision too big for their tiny minds to contain. The betrayal you survived didn't diminish you. It revealed you. It showed you what you're made of. And if you choose to rise even one more time, even when it hurts, you will build something no thief can ever steal. Not your soul. Not your fire. Not your future. You are not what they took from you. You are everything you are building right now. And they can't touch that. My name is Hannah. And if I could turn ashes into an empire, so can you.